presentation, I'm Shanice, if you don't know me. My presentation today is on Huntington's disease. Huntington's disease is a neurodegenerative brain disorder. Neurodegenerative basically just means the loss of structure and function of the neurons, sometimes even resulting in death of the neurons. Huntington's disease progresses with motor, cognitive, and behavioral symptoms and eventually leads to death. Anywhere between 15 to 20 years after the diagnosis. Normally is due to infection. The most common cause of death within this population is ammonia from aspiration. Specifically, Huntington's is caused by the elongation of the trinucleotide repeat section of the gene which we all have, which is the Huntington's gene. This mutant, it's a mutation that's caused by a specific protein. Commonly, symptoms begin between the ages of 35 and 45 years old. However, it's not entirely uncommon for elderly individuals to start the onset later in life. Also, because of genetic anticipation, around 6% of individuals will see onset of symptoms before their 21st birthday. And unfortunately, this type of Huntington's is very fast progressive, and there is no known cure. Different areas are affected based on the type of structure as well as the neurons within the structure. For example, the stratal spiny neurons within the basal ganglia, which we've learned about today, is the most vulnerable to this disease. The basal ganglia is in charge of voluntary motor control as well as emotional functions, learning related to routine behaviors such as habits. Oh, and the the other structures that can be affected by this disease include the cerebral cortical layers as well as the hypothalamus, hippothalamus. As we all know, those lie within the base of the forebrain. So this is where we meet Tommy. He's a 41-year-old man. He was diagnosed 6 months ago with early to mid-stage Huntington's disease. There are 3 stages: early, mid, and late. He came to me complaining of a soft voice, even though he thinks receptively he's speaking plenty loud for people to hear. People around him are having a hard time understanding what he says due to the soft quality of it. He's also having problems with coughing and choking while eating, and that includes incomplete swallows, so there's still material within his throat or oral cavity after he swallows. His family, he lives with his wife and 2 children. They're expressing concerns about his depression levels, which is very common within this population, and he was referred to me by his neurologist after his diagnosis through different neurological and genetic testings. So through evaluation, I really wanted to determine kind of a baseline of his skills regarding his communication and swallowing. So for his swallowing, I did a modified barium swallow, and I found mild aspiration. Also, regarding his problem with the soft amplitude of voice, I had him hold the sound ah for as long as he could at 70 dB, which is a relatively appropriate level for communication. And his range was between 6 to 8 seconds, which is below average for a normal healthy individual. I also wanted to begin to evaluate his abilities with AAC, just because early intervention and being able to practice these types of communication tasks will be a lot easier to have when he needs them later on in life, and he'll need to really, that's the only way he's going to be able to communicate. I also did an oral motor exam, which determined that he did have lingual movement weakness. And I had him spontaneously describe pictures to me to determine if he was having word-finding problems, which is common, and he did not have those quite yet. So when developing therapy strategies for his communication, I first wanted to assess his first concern was with the pitch problem. This I kind of did something similar to the assessment to where I had him, it's called Intensive Amplitude Specific Therapeutic Approach. So I had him hold the sound ah for as long as he could at 70 dB, and we repeated that over a course of about 10 to 15 minutes, and this type of activity makes people break out into a sweat. It's pretty intensive. Also, I had him begin to journal or diary to help him with his working memory, because this will become an issue when the disease progresses. I also wanted to work with remotivational therapy, which is a 5-model program, and it overall just wants to work with the main problems with this community. They focus too much on the skills they used to have, and they don't appreciate the skills they still have. And that'll also be worked through with a team of therapists. All of these will include a team of physical therapists, occupational therapists, myself as an SLP, and a psychologist. And lastly, regarding his support system, it's really important to educate his family regarding specific modes of treatment and techniques of swallowing and communication, including kind of limiting distractions within the environment, so if TV is too loud. Also formatting questions within easier formats, so yes or no, and just really to keep patience with Tommy, because patience is critical. And then lastly, for his swallowing solutions, I first had him drink through a straw to see if that helped. However, he was still having problems, so we went over optimal positions for swallowing, and we modified his diet to a finely chopped diet, and then kind of introduced him to a liquid diet. He will have to go through that later on in life and rely on that type of diet. And regarding my follow-up, I wanted to see him on a regular basis. But overall, I wanted to try and accentuate that I wanted to preserve and maintain his highest level of communication and swallowing skills, because there are no reverse treatments, and we did catch this early with him within the first stage. So this early involvement and intervention will really help him in the long run. So just to summarize, we're maximizing his quality of life through this type of therapy.